Okay, today we'll talk a little bit about notebooks. What's the real difference between a notebook and a tower or a gigantic tower?
Portability.
Portability. They got all the same components. Heat can be an issue, more of an issue with these things too. You need to be sure again that the airways are clear, and they're a lot harder to get to because if we want to clean out a desktop or a tower or a mini tower, all you do, you just pop the top off, pop the side off, and blow it out. Not quite so easy with a laptop. And that's one of the things that we want to do. I want you to take apart a laptop to see how painful they are. And they really are, depending on the manufacturer. I had a Toshiba that must have had about 10,000 screws in it. And then I had a little Mac that must have had about 10,000 screws that were even smaller than the Toshiba. Some things are replaceable. What people tend to do with laptops, and we've had some students got some really good deals on laptops come by and said they weren't any good, the screen was bad, la-da-da, whatever else. Gave them to them, and then they would go repair and buy a new screen with the screen, $40, $50 maybe. Put the new screen in, and you had a laptop again, and then they would resell those things. That's 100%, well, not 100%, it's 40, whatever you could get above the screen. Some things are upgradable, replaceable, most of them aren't. And when we look in these things, we're not going to find any expansion slots. It's kind of what you see is what you get, except for the USB ports. Well, there are some other things, but video, stuff like that we can add a second monitor, which is kind of a handy thing to do at times. Upgrade the memory, upgrade the hard drive, but not a whole lot of upgradability in one. Yes?
What is it called when you have the laptops with the like upgradable video card?
Upgradable video card? I guess it would be a laptop with an upgradable video card. Most of them really don't have a whole lot. Well, you can do whatever you can get into the ports, and this goes back to just like the expansion slots in a desktop. We're limited to what we can do. Whatever you have on this thing, HDMI, you could connect an HDMI monitor to it. VGA, you could connect a VGA monitor to it. HDMI, a lot of people connect their television to it, their big screen TVs to it to play videos or game or whatever else they want to do through their laptop. But an external video card, I don't know that I've ever actually seen one that had that external devices, yes. But laptops are generally what you see is what you get. And you're not going to probably be doing gaming like you're doing with a high-speed, big video card with these things. When you get these laptops apart, you can kind of see what's in there. They're not brand new, obviously. Otherwise, we'd be using them instead of ripping them up. But what's there is what's there. What happens when an onboard component dies? If you can replace it with a USB component, a radio, something like that for wireless, you can expand it. Hard drive dies, they're relatively easy to replace, although some of them, they try to disguise how you actually get the hard drive out. The books are normally available online, and in the Moodle page at the top, there's a listing of how to get to the different manufacturers to get to those things. So the objective, special considerations supporting notebooks that are different from supporting desktop computers, expandability, we're not going to, upgradability, we're not going to have a tremendous amount of that. Memory, can you upgrade, add memory? Sure. How difficult is it? That they typically make pretty easy. You just take a panel off, take the old out, put the new in. And it goes back to everything else. You've got to be sure that your bus is going to support what you want to put into the system. How to configure, optimize, and troubleshoot slots, ports, peripheral devices used with notebooks. Yes, the troubleshooting process is going to be the same as everything else, and except that in a desktop, one of the recommendations from most are do one thing at a time. Guy around here that's probably the best troubleshooter that is around, the first thing that he says he does when he gets one he doesn't know what's wrong with, just doesn't work, take everything out. And then start putting the components in one at a time. until you get to the one that fails. It's tough to take all the components out of the laptop. You can control some stuff in the BIOS. How to replace and upgrade the internal components in a notebook and an all-in-one, and the internal components that we're going to be able to do basically going to be the memory, hard drive, maybe the wireless radio. But the rest of it, when you get it apart, you're going to find, I think, mostly it's going to be soldered onto the motherboard itself. Troubleshoot problems with notebooks, same problems with notebooks as with desktops. They're computers. Just like routers are computers. They're all computers. They do the calculation for us. Notebook, laptop, portable computer, varieties. The tablets have more features than a notebook. A netbook's smaller, has fewer features than a notebook, and smaller keyboard when you start trying to type. If you have big hands, netbooks may not be the place to go. But they're smaller, they're lightweight. Many of them are going to be running Linux instead of Windows. You can get them you can probably get a netbook for under $200 with Linux on it, not with Windows on it. But those things, they're handy to have, something lightweight. And I'm not sure that if you have a child that needs some sort of a portable device in school, that's not the way to go, just from a weight standpoint. Because I see these kids, and I was driving somewhere yesterday, saw this little girl. This girl must be his first or second grader, get on a bus, and the book bag was about as big as the child. So weight, if weight is an issue, then those are the way to go. Tablets, says more features than a notebook. Yeah, kind of, sort of, maybe. Tablets are really neat, but I think are kind of difficult to do productivity with. You ever try to type a term paper on that touch keyboard? You may have an issue with that. The transformer, convertible, whatever you want to call it, kind of a popular thing, not something that the Macs have really gone for, but Windows has gone into. And back to the early discussions, one of the reasons that we can have those things coming down in price so rapidly is that there's competition in the non-Apple world. And I think that we're getting competition, you can comment, from other people into the Apple world, into the iPad world. People are starting to do those things. Yes?
Are netbooks more like a workstation?
Netbooks are like a stripped-down desktop. They're our desktop, laptop. They're just little small laptops, usually 10 or 12-inch laptops, something like that. But they're really notebooks with limited capability, limited expandability. A lot of them don't have, for instance, may not have a CD or an optical drive, a CD-ROM drive or something like that. Pretty much is what you see is what you get. Well, keyboard, screen, memory, operating system, hard drive. A lot of them have SSDs. I've noticed as I've started to look at these things, and the SSDs obviously cost more, but they're going to be much quicker. Even the Linux machines frequently are going to have SSDs with them now instead of hard drives. So they're basically just a stripped down, not real powerful notebook machine. Laptop notebook. Comparing notebooks to desktops, they use the same technology. They're computers. They have the same functionality, smaller, portable. Use less power, at least we hope they use less power. Well, they do use less power. Replacement parts cost more than desktops and are more difficult to repair unless you do the real basic things like hard drive or memory. Those are pretty straightforward. Panels on the back, open them up, pop it out, pop it in. Again, some of the older ones, they really made the hard drives much trickier than the new ones. Varieties of ports and slots in these things. This is a picture of one of something, and each of the laptops are going to have their own ports. One of the things that kind of drive some of us crazy, and this is one that is that way. In the Cisco world is, one of the things that I look at this and notice that it immediately that it's missing if I wanted to do router maintenance is I didn't have a serial port. To get into a Cisco router through the console, you go through a serial port, an RS-232 port. Since this doesn't have one, you've got to go get yourself a USB. We have USB 2 ports here, and a USB 3, the blue ones. You got to go get yourself a USB to serial adapter, and then move into the router that way. The DC jack is going to be about the same. So we're really talking here battery, and the batteries typically are not that difficult to get in and out. A battery that's chargeable by an external power supply. And that's what the DC jack here to plug these things in. HDMI ports, we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. What do you want to connect it to? Larger monitor, typically going to be a television. It's kind of a handy thing that I use. I got to where I don't use my laptop a whole lot anymore. What I mostly use it for is to watch stuff off the internet and stream it to TV. We don't travel a whole lot. I used to take it to the hotel and do those things. Now if you've got a tablet and bought a tablet, you take those with you. They're a lot lighter, take a lot less space, a lot easier to move around with. And what do you actually do when you're traveling? If you're in business, you're obviously going to do the business stuff. But if I'm traveling, I do, look at the internet and read email. I can do that really well on a tablet. Yes?
Is there a way to set up, say, I'm not going to say high-end laptop, but somewhere mid-grade, to have like the monitor on it and then have another monitor like dual?
Oh yeah, monitors are easy. That's what HDMI. We also have a VGA port here, so you can have the two connectors there. You can have those monitors along with it.
Be like a heat problem.
Well, maybe heat problem. The second monitor, and that's essentially what I said I'm doing, is I take the laptop and I actually use the VGA port because the HDMI port's dead on that particular television. Instead of using the HDMI, I just use VGA to go to the television. The advantage of HDMI is it does both sound and video. So what I have to do is use my VGA port and then go down here and use my speaker port to connect to the television, so I get both video and sound with the thing. Other things that are available typically on these things are going to be the Ethernet port, where we can have a wired internet as well as a wireless. And I think that in all those, a lot of times in these books they say, oh, you can do this and do that. And I've got an example of a PCMCIA card here. But this one doesn't even have they talk about it later on in the book, in this lecture, I think, in this lesson. But there's not even a PCMCIA slot here. So you're not going to do that. That's just the PCMCIA and the card bus and those things are just simply like when we talked about. Form factors are just a description of the size and the pins and the way that things plug into the system itself. Typically what we're going to expand a laptop with is going to be the USB ports, and that's one of the things that you need to look at. Down here we have the optical drive. In the good old days, in the bad old days, used to have a laptop that had, when we had floppies, had a plug-in. You plug the whole module in, and you could either have, in this case, this was a CD drive, or, and I don't have it, couldn't find it, the other one plug in, it would be a floppy drive. So the new ones, the optical discs, probably going to be DVD on everything today. Cable lock here, security, to do those things with, and then we have a microphone port and a speaker port. Those are going to be for the externals. Again, typically on a laptop, you're going to have a built-in speaker microphone system. The speakers act as the microphone so that you can use those things without those. Warranties, and this is a big concern for most things, is if you take it apart, and a lot of them put the little seal on them, if you take it apart, have you voided the warranty? So check to be sure that it is or isn't under warranty before you pop it out. You can get a certification to become a Dell Tech, for instance. If you get that certification, then you obviously can work on those things. But check those. If information is needed, the Novak model, serial number, what you're going to need, the purchaser name, phone number, and address. And again, on the Dells, if you have the tag number on that, you can go in and it has all of that information for you. You can go in and find out what it was. And what this will give you on the information from the manufacturer side is the way it was originally configured. If it's been changed, you won't know that. Service options on-site, ship to authorized service center, phone assisted, and on-site depends on how the warranty's set up. I think they're getting on-site means to me at your house. And I think that's getting to be less and less and less. Ship to the authorized service center, and we just had a friend who had a laptop problem. And what they said was, take the hard drive out, send the computer back. When they do that, when you ship these things off, there's no guarantee, and the reason we take the hard drive out, there's no guarantee that you're going to get back the device that you sent. It'll have the same configuration, but if you send it with a hard drive, you may get one probably without a hard drive. But at best, somebody else is going to have your hard drive with your information. And that's one of the reasons I think that the hard drives are so easy to take out. Phone assistance and online chat may or may not work. Shaking your head no. I mean, that's something that I think it depends upon the company and the help desks. They have the scripts that they go through, and they check that. But we've seen a couple of flow charts, and they have their flow charts. If this, that, this, and on. That's why they ask sometimes that we think are like, why they ask a question like that? That's part of their flow chart, and they're set up to do those things. The model number, and this just showed that it is available on the machine. This one's on the back of the machine down here. And when we look at this thing right here, we have a little button here to open the things up. That's going to probably be the battery, and the battery is this area here. And back here, probably in this vicinity, we're going to have the memory, and back here somewhere is probably going to be the hard drive. Those things, again, typically they're going to be relatively easy to get to. Everything else, not so much. Service manuals and enable safe notebook disassembly. We've had a lot of people, and the ones you take apart are probably going to have some broken parts because people like to force them. And that's okay for the junkers that we're going to play with, so you can see what's inside them and see how to take them apart. But if you're doing one to repair for somebody, they're not going to appreciate it if you get back a cracked case. The books are available. The service manuals will say, oh yeah, they've got a hidden screw, and a lot of times they're hidden screws. Take this part off. Changing, and I will go back to the Mac, changing a Mac keyboard. Keyboard's something relatively simple. Take the K key off or something like that, the keycap off, and then there's a screw under the keycap, which you would not find without the directions on how to do those things. So see if you can find the service manual before you start ripping it up and prying things apart, because they will come apart. Service manual, the physical manual, the manufacturer's website, third-party websites, and it's where are they? There are lots of things. And the other place that I would say is your friend and mine, YouTube. There's an awful lot of, this is how to take this particular one apart. How do I replace a screen? Step-by-step instructions with actual motion you can follow through on those things. The user manual, down there, basic Magnus task user manual is usually, this is how you do this is how you do that kind of thing. The user, not the repair manual. Again, components and diagnostics, manufacturer's website, CDs bundled with the desktop, external hard drive, external tools, PC Doctor, and that's just one that they put up. There are a number of troubleshooting softwares that are available. You may have to start out with it won't boot kind of thing, though. And so you may want, and again, start building yourself a set of diagnostic discs because they're handy to have. Just simple things like password reset. Somebody forgot their password, messed up their password, whatever else. Password reset, there's a number of those out there. You can start building either bootable DVDs, CD, DVD, or bootable flash drives. The bootable flash drives are much more convenient, obviously, to carry around. You can get multiples. Again, within your head, YUMI will put multiple ISOs on a single flash drive so that you can have multiple of diagnostic disks with those. A number of those are available here, there, and everywhere. PC Doctor are included in some notebooks. It says in HP notebooks. It wasn't in mine, but I guess because mine was so cheap that they didn't give it to me. OEM, or original equipment manufacturer. We see that term all the time. What does that actually mean to you? If you have a copy of original equipment manufacturer and we get OEM versions of the operating system, what that means is the operating system is sold with that set of hardware. You're not supposed to take that license and put it someplace else. That's what OEM licenses are about. An OEM license is for the manufacturer typically going to be cheaper. That's one of the reasons that the laptops may or may not be there. Proprietary drivers, what does that mean to you? Somebody wants you to upgrade from Windows XP to Windows 7. Get the drivers. Get the drivers. We used to have a guy here, and he was really good. And people would bring in their computers for him to repair, and he would do a really great job. One of the first things that he would do is blow them away because he's nuking it. He'd just wipe everything out and start over. Problem is, when you wipe everything out and start over, is there going to be proprietary drivers. Save those before you start. And what would typically happen is, all the drivers are available on the internet, but the thing that didn't work was the NIC. So you couldn't get to the internet to get the drivers that you didn't. It's just save them before you go. Customized diagnostic software, all of those may be available with these things. And this is the use caution when upgrading to the new OS because of back to these proprietary drivers. They're not going to be the standard drivers. We used to have an issue with Dells. It's really kind of cool. PXE, pre-execution environment, which means you can boot to the NIC and install the operating system. So we used to boot to the NIC and install the operating system, and when Windows got installed, the NICs didn't work. Now, they worked to install the operating system, but because of the proprietary drivers, and this was in a desktop, because of the proprietary drivers that were in that specialized motherboard, when it got installed, Windows couldn't recognize the NIC. So be careful of those when you're upgrading for people. Recovery partitions and recovery CDs, and I think that in today's world, that generally speaking, you got to create your own recovery partition. Be aware of this. I had some people want me to help them with a computer one time, and they did that. They used the recovery CD. This goes back to when you walked out of the store with it. Anything that you've added to the machine ain't going to be there. The Windows backup, and presuming we're using Windows in these courses, are really focused towards Windows, and the test is focused towards Windows. With the backup program and imaging, you can create an image of your machine relatively easily using the backup software. You may want to consider doing that when you get to a stable state with everything installed. To me, that's the great way to do it. You should at least have a backup of the operating system. And that goes back when we talked to hard drives. How are you going to partition your hard drive? Really consider doing an operating system partition and then on everything else, the data and programs and all that other stuff someplace else. So that if the operating system dies and you have to destroy that partition and reinstall it, you haven't lost all your data. Because odds are, and you guys will probably all say you do, odds are you don't have a current backup. You may, but I know I don't. Also, for data, and I know that's not this, but it can be kind of related to laptops, consider one of these things that replicates, one of the cloud storages that replicates. Yes, they may or may not have issues. Yeah, you probably don't want to put your most secret things there, like your nude photos. All your nude photos, don't put them there. Somebody may steal them. But for just regular data, if it's replicated, the computer dies, then it's stored someplace else. Or replication software, replicate 2 computers, do something. Then you have an instantaneous backup. Backups tend to be done at regular intervals, middle of the night kind of thing. So anything that you did during the day and then it got crashed, it's not going to have a backup. Just some things to think about. Recovery CDs used to come with the older ones, and again, the first thing it does is when you boot this thing and say, yep, I want to do that, to wipe out everything that's on the hard drive, and then it re-images the hard drive. So be careful when you do those. It has a recovery partition, and this is not very visible, but it does say healthy recovery here, and then we're going to have all the other stuff back. Here's our C drive. Other ones that I can't read at this range on this thing, but may or may not have a recovery partition, may or may not have a recovery drive. You may need to make the recovery partition.
The healthy recovery partition, what that one is.
Yeah, which means that we could boot to the recovery partition, and when we did that, it would image the recovery partition over here to our C drive, and that program that you just installed ain't going to be there when it gets done. Because all you get from the recovery partition is what was installed on the machine when it walked out the door with you. Only if necessary, upgrade the OS build from the manufacturer. And again, we're going back to proprietary drivers and those sorts of things. Ensure the supporting device drivers are included, absolutely. Follow the OEM specification. What that's saying is go back to Dell or HP or Compaq or Lenovo, whoever made the device, and see what they're upgrading, what they're recommending, because they get proprietary motherboards, proprietary drivers, proprietary everything, which means that if we go in, just like the guy that nuked everything and put a standard version of Windows on, guess what didn't work? Just about everything, unless you took the driver set with you. System component compatibility, and this is the drivers of what we were talking about here. Be sure that the standard Windows that you guys get as students for free, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows XP, so you get them all. You can put those typically on these, but be very aware that you need the manufacturer or the OEM, the manufacturer's drivers. General guidelines: don't touch the LCP panel with sharp objects because you don't want to put holes in. Don't pick it up or hold it by the lid. The hinges are not really designed to do that. The OEM battery packs, and I think that that's an issue. I guess that can be an issue. A lot of people out there selling battery packs now. That's been a problem with some machines, that they incinerate themselves occasionally with the batteries. Typically can be a recall. I think Dell had a problem with them, and it's not such a big deal if they're sitting there. But if you're sitting on an airplane and the thing starts burning, you got a real problem. There's no place to run, no place to hide with those things. So be aware, stay up to date with those. Do not tightly pack in a suitcase, put pressure on it, those kinds of things. These are kind of just, I think, general rules or kind of common sense things that you do and don't want to do with these things. Do not put close to appliance generating strong magnetic field. And why don't we want to do that? What's the magnetic field going to do for us? That's another thing that causes the color issues that you were talking about earlier, is if there is a magnetic field can cause those things. This could damage the hard drive, damage the electronics, cause the image to be kind of weird. We used to have, and I think I told you in an earlier class, we used to have, in the room where the library is, used to be a big lab, and we had a machine sitting real close to that power filter in there, and it would make all sorts of kind of weird stuff on the monitor from the magnetic field. So be aware of those things. Do not connect to the internet using a public network without setting the network location to public, and that's a big deal. What this does, the public on this thing, when you pick a public network at Starbucks and McDonald's and those places, and you should do that, it does some firewall, automatic firewall configurations that kind of makes it, not kind of, but puts it to the point that other users can't connect to you and shouldn't be able to see your machine. When you're at home, you can use a home network or the work network, and they're essentially the same. There's really not a whole lot of difference, like none, between the home network and the well, there is, between the home network and the work network. The difference is the home network allows you to, or the home selection allows you to create the home network, which shares the information on that network, and others can join it. With a password, you can't do that with the work. More things, passwords. Use passwords with each user Windows account, and you should use passwords, and you should use good passwords, complex passwords, good complex passwords. There are softwares, not so good on logging on, but there are pieces of software that will generate passwords for you, and I keep seeing this ad for one that you can buy. There's one called KeePass that's free. And what you do is you have a good password on it. It's stored on your computer. And then when you want to get into some of the other places that you have passwords for, you can use it to bring up your password. You can actually use it to log on with the system, with the username and password on these things. With me, it's a good deal because I have to go to this government site, which has what I feel is an absolutely ludicrous password requirement. It's like 18 to 25 characters. Isn't that right? You got to have a uppercase, lowercase, special character, but only some special characters. You can't have more than 4 characters in your new password that were in your old password, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So I set this thing up to where it'll generate the password for me. And where we generate things that kind of look like words, it's just generating nonsense, which makes it a little more difficult for somebody to get to, although they've got to be able to get, most of you to be able to get to it. Mostly we give stuff away. That's what becomes the issue. Keep the notebook at room temperature. If it's been sitting in a cold car, been sitting in the car all night, and you bring it in, don't turn it on straight away, because you're going to get condensation when you start getting the heating, and you can cause damage to these things. Let it come up to room temperature. Keep the operating system current, and that's not anything that's specific to laptops. All of them should be that way. I guess the laptops, because if it's like a kid like me, I just use it occasionally, and every time I turn it on, it's got 14 or 15 updates, because I don't really turn it on that often anymore when I do these things. Keep away from smoke, water, and dust. And again, that's not specific to laptops. That's specific to all computers. Smokers put a layer of nicotine on the electronic devices inside. It can cause issues with that. And if you are, and I don't think anybody in here is a smoker, but if you are a smoker, don't smoke around your computer. Do not power up and down unnecessarily. Okay, we won't do that. Don't run it while it's in the case, resting on the pillow or covered in the blanket. The resting on the pillow, these things, and covered by a blanket, these things are issues with heat dissipation, because the ports that allow, or the openings that allow the heat are typically going to be low. They have the cooling pads, and I've never used one, but they should work pretty well. Also, thinking back to the way hard drives work, SSDs, different situation. We don't have that issue, but with the read-write heads, while it's running, be careful about moving these CDs. Even though the hard drives are hardened in them, you still should be careful with that. Protect it against ESD, electrostatic, so that we don't have those issues, and we're going to use that for everything. And again, don't do like the student I told you about that had their wristband on or protecting against the electrostatic discharge and clipped it onto the plastic part. That works real well. Be sure on the metal, you want to be grounded to the thing. Remove the CD, DVD from the player before traveling. You can break those things. Anybody ever broken one of those other than me?
What?
A CD in the computer? Yeah. They shatter really nicely, and you have a real good cleanup effort. And in the laptop, the real good cleanup effort, not nearly as easy as in the desktop, because you got to get the thing apart. And again, we're going to play with that a little bit.
They were, show Mythbusters. They was doing a test to see how fast the disc could go before it just...
Before it shattered. Yeah, I did.
They were doing that because people were...
What we tended to do, and I don't remember exactly what it was. It was some machines that when you set them on their side to take up less space, the CDs were actually in sideways, and these are in sideways. These machines here just confuse the heck out of me when you put them in, because to me they actually go in what would be the underside. I kept trying to put one in what I thought was the top of the DVD player on this one. One go, put it on the other side. So, oh yeah, that's the way it goes. But how they go in when they do those things. Take precautions if the notebook gets wet. If it gets wet, let it dry out thoroughly. Keep in mind, let me finish that statement. Water is a conductor. If you have chemicals in the water, you can get debris deposits on the computer itself. If it gets wet and it gets dried out completely before you turn it on, then there's no water to conduct and you don't create the short circuit. So if they do get wet, be sure that they are dried thoroughly before you try to apply power. The cleaning tips, the LCD panel with a soft dry cloth. There's a number of people with the microfiber cloths now. There are screen cloths to go to those things. Bought a set at Walmart for the house cleaning. It had a screen, glass, and a dust. The screen works really nicely on laptops, tablets, television, all of those things. Use compressed air to keyboard, touchpad, trackball, blow out the air vents. And blowing out the air vents can be a big deal because these things are going to be something because they are so small. And they're going to generate heat because we still have the processor in them that you really need to get the airflow across them. And if you sit with a laptop, I think that's kind of an odd name, a laptop. Do you ever sit with it on your lap? You should do that sometime just to see how hot it gets. Very rarely, but they're nice and warm, aren't they? I guess it'd be great in the winter if you're sitting in a cold room, but they do generate a lot of heat. Remove keyboard keys if they're sticking and blow air under the keys. And this is another thing that I didn't say in the other list. Keyboards generally can be replaced in these things relatively easily. Contact cleaner for the battery connectors if you need to do that. And you may get some corrosion if you take them in, take them out. Typically on batteries, if you take them in, take them out, they'll do a little bit of a self-cleaning on themselves. Buttons and switches above the keyboard, same settings, and each of these things, the buttons and keyboards are going to be a function of the laptop, the manufacturer. It goes back to the user manual. What does each of these things do? We've had all sorts of experiences here. Had an instructor, not an IT instructor, come in one night and said, my wireless was working at home, and then I got here and it's not working. All I did was put it in the little carry case. When we put it in the little carry case, he turned the radio off with the switch. Some of these things have physical switches to turn these off and on. Be sure that the radio is actually turned on. Why would we want to turn the radio off? That's a big power sucker. If you want to save power on these things, turn the wireless off. All of those things. And a lot of the processors have power controls on them to kind of go down. Here we go with your monitors, Jeremy. How you can do that, he says this is disconnect the projector, this is active projector duplicate. And that's what I'm running on this system, and if you look at what's on the desktop and what's on the screen here, they are duplicates side by side. We can use it extended, or we could, and I don't know why the heck you would want to do this except to confuse yourself. You can turn it off on the device and turn it on the remote device only. Touchpads, personally, this is the thing that I love to hate. They drive me crazy, but they're there. They really are better than the old systems before we had touchpads because you can get around a lot quicker than with the old trackballs when we do those things. USB wired or wireless mouse, some prefer. That would be me that prefer that. I guess because I'm just not coordinated enough. Except my USB mouse, I think the batteries just quit because the Bluetooth dongle detects, but it won't do anything. So I'm sure it's the batteries. Of course, it's the battery type that I don't have any of at home. But when we do those things, the touchpad, track pointer, each of those things depends on what you prefer. They make some little bitty rodents to go with laptops, call them laptop mice, which are very small. May have an extendable, retractable cord to go with them. When I was at Blue Ridge, they bought some of those, and one of the users said this thing only works if I roll it around on my leg. They did not work well. These were some Amazon specials. Bought them, a whole box of them for not a whole lot. But be careful what you get with those things. Mouse properties, all of those things, the mouse trails, how you want to. And this is nothing that's different than any other thing that we're going to do this with. Tablets, stylus control from a pen and input device. To me, and this is just me, one of the issues with a tablet is when you touch the thing, you're putting your fingerprints all over it, and eventually the screen gets pretty messy. Stylus is kind of handy. You can buy them for all different prices. I think Chris got an active stylus, which is really neat because it's got a fine point. But it costs like $30 or $40. Yeah, that's a resistive stylus. Most of the ones today, and that comes with your phone, right? And that's some of the ads now. It says like the iPhone 6 is like the Android, the earlier Android without stylus. Kind of handy to have. The new ones are just kind of capacitive, big areas to touch them with, kind of like touching with your finger. And yeah, you can write with them. They don't really work all that well, but they only cost about $4 or $5 now, unless you go to Staples where they're $12. That's for him. PCMCIA ExpressCards. We're going to go through these relatively quickly. A PCMCIA card holding it up here. Recording, you can't see it, but they're available. This is a wireless NIC, a really old wireless NIC, and that's typically what they're going to be used for. The size, the number of pins, and the size basically is what each of these standards defines. Older notebooks would have these slots, could be those a PC card, card bus, express card. Each of them was a little bit different size, and that was the difference in it. So it's just a matter of so that we can really be confused about what we use. We have kind of standardization with each of those different ones, but no real standardization to a single connector. Which is what we have with USB, is we have standardization to a single connector. So USB, lots of different USB devices. A USB NIC. Lost my USB NIC. Here we go. USB NIC, which just looks like a oversized. This again is an old one. The new ones are much smaller. Looks like a flash drive. each of those things. PCMCIA, each of these things allows us to do that. I go back to this one, the PC card, 16-bit ISA bus. Hopefully you will never ever see any of that. Can you imagine how old a 16-bit ISA bus is? Some of these over here on the wall are ISAs, they're not. Laptop, well, there is a laptop. There is a laptop board over there, but you're not going to see any of those things. The card bus increased it to 32 bits, and the ExpressCard matches the PCI Express and USB 2. Two sizes, the ExpressCard 3/4 and the ExpressCard 5/4. They're not backward compatible. Hot pluggable, hot swappable, that means that we can plug them in and take them out while the computer's running. And most of these external devices, and that's the real beauty of USB, isn't it? It is hot swappable. Don't want that, I want this, unplug it, plug it back in. You don't have to go through a reboot process. Yes?
Is there any instances we'll see now where there's, like I was talking about the hardware from a desktop that they can be put in a laptop, like anything?
Hardware, probably not, because you're going to find, and again, when we get these apart, I think that the picture's worth 1,000 words thing. What would you put in? Huh?
I was thinking like a solid state for the system.
Like a solid, well, no, because it's going to be too big. Solid state device for a laptop, we're going to have this size.
That's what the top line is.
It's about what yours is, but I bet it's an inch bigger.
An inch?
Yeah.
So is that like 1.5?
This is a 1.5, and I bet yours is a 2.5. Would be my guess. And you got to have the, either serial ATA or PAYUNG IDE. I had somebody gave me a really big, like a 500 gig. It was really big at the time. 750 gig, something like that. Serial ATA hard drive. Well, my laptop has a parallel ATA IDE. If you go on the internet, they've got a laptop IDE to serial ATA converter. And it plugged in really nice, except when I tried to put it in the machine. It won't match up. And there's no room to put a cable in these things. They're very tight fit. You've got to have the devices that actually fit in the area. But yeah, I think that you probably have 2.5-inch SSDs. That's just a guess. We'd have to look at them. Something like that, could you? Absolutely, because a standard is a standard is a standard.
I know I have two solid states in mind. The little compartment, you could put both of them beside each other.
Yeah. These are the card slots you're going to have. We got the eject button here with these things, and over here is the ExpressCard slot, which brings it out. Typically, in the old laptops that you'll be using back here, I think have these slots. A lot of times you'll have a couple of slots on top of each other, so you can put more than one device in an area. And we go here, we've got what our sound over here, and we got an S-video connector here. Older machine, different components that we can put into these things. Socket service, removing the card, use safely, express slot, proceed to eject the card. Lots of specific instruction here for things that you probably know how to do, like push the button. Backup drivers may be stored on the hard drive. Again, backups of drivers may be stored on the hard drive. If the hard drive crashes, they have a lot of good stuff. Yes, we want backups of the drivers, and it's stored on the hard drive, and the hard drive crashes. Guess what? The driver just crashed along with it. Take this stuff off of the machine, put it someplace and store it where you can get to it when you need it. If you're like me, you'll put it someplace, forget where you put it. If you ever need it, you know you got it, but you don't know where it is. But if you store it, you'll never need it again. So maybe that's a way to keep those things from doing that. AC adapter or battery pack can be run on either. The auto switching, when you plug it into AC, it automatically charges the battery and runs off of the AC when we do those things. Lithium-ion technologies, which have caused issues. And these are the ones that the Dells, and they're not the only one that have had battery issues. And these guys usually don't make their own batteries. It's the battery manufacturers. Had problems with them burning up. They also had problems with with the Dreamliner. It got grounded because of that, didn't it? Runaway, but what was it caused by? The batteries. The battery pack. Now, this wasn't a little battery pack like we put into the laptop. These are huge, enormous battery packs that go into these things, but the same technology.
What is the Dreamliner?
It's a big airplane. It's a Boeing airplane. It's got a huge number. I don't remember. I don't remember what its 7 designation is. 787.
Hey, something big.
Yeah.
Is it bigger than
Yeah.
the Airbus?
Yes, it's bigger than the Airbus. It's actually the direct competitor to the Airbus, I think, isn't it?
It must have 300 passengers thing.
Yeah, this one's same. We're talking same. Yeah. Travel adapter, the inverter. You can use in your car to change the DC from the front. Well, this is really kind of makes it strange. Okay, we use an inverter and we take the DC from the car and we change it to AC. And then we go to the power supply of the computer and we take the AC and we change it back to DC. Makes no sense. But they didn't go directly from, and I think the issue is 9 volts versus 12 volts. Does that sound right? Which would be the issue with this. The car being the 12 volt and the computer being the 9 volt. But you can get these things, inverter. You probably want to not run it forever with the car sitting still. I don't know what the actual pull on the battery is going to be a function of how big the battery is. If you got one of those great huge diesel batteries, it's probably going to last for a long time. If you got 4 diesel batteries, my diesel only had 1. But yeah, I've seen those things. Big truck the other day. When they were doing the roof, it had 2 batteries in it, and they left the lights on around the battery down. So the one that started the truck was dead. The other one wasn't. Bring a charger in, get the thing going. But those kinds of things. Power management to conserve power. And a lot of this is going to be automatic. You really do, in a laptop, want to do power management. It may not be a big deal or an issue at all in your desktop, although I kind of like to turn the monitor off, but that's about it. Laptop, you want the processor to power down, and a lot of them will do that automatically. Actually, they kind of have like gear shifts in the processor. As it needs more processing power, it brings more power to the processor, and you can tell that they actually make more noise. The fans go at a higher speed. Sleep mode, suspend mode, saves power with these things. Hibernation. Hibernation means that we take what's in memory and save it on the hard drive. You have to have enough space on the hard drive. It gets reserved when you enable hibernation, but you have enough space on the hard drive to save all of the memory to the hard drive. And when you start it back up, then everything is read back into memory and you start over from where you were. Yes?
Do laptops do the same thing as like well, at least my motherboard does it, where it stays lit when the power is off?
What are you talking about, the LEDs?
Like my little display.
You're probably not going to find many LEDs in them. You're not going to see that. Talking about power on the bus. They're going to have some power on the bus. Yeah, okay. It depends on what state you put them in.
Like I just please shut it down.
If you completely shut it down, then they're shut down. The reason that we have power on those buses is to run like the NICs and things like that to keep them active. And again, that's going to be a function of the motherboard. Do all of them do that? And most of them do now, but do they have to? Not really. All that's going to be a function. And part of, we'll get to this, states here. These are the power states. And this is ACPI. The BIOS might refer to the 5S states. These are things that are configurable in the BIOS itself. Hard drive and monitor are turned off. Everything else runs normally. And again, back to your question. Depends on what power state you're in, what power state you have set. The processor is also turned off. Everything is shut down except RAM and enough system to respond to the wake up and sleep mode. And that's why right here, to wake up in sleep mode is the reason that we would want power on the bus. And that's typically in an environment like this, where you'd wake them up in the middle of the night to do your updates or those sorts of things. S4 hibernating, where it actually is saved to the hard drive and shuts down the system. S5 power state's off after a normal shutdown. So it depends on what power state you have selected on these things is what happens. We had an issue and I don't remember which power state it was. It was on the server with the virtual machines. It's got so much power, it's got, you know, like 8 cores. And if you didn't have a big load on it, it would kind of say, yeah, I don't really need this stuff, and it would shut down the processors, except it would forget to bring the processors back up when it needed them. So these things are configurable when you do those things. Port replicator, this is the connect the full-size monitor. This is the VGA port that we were talking about. And a docking station. A docking station is when you plug your computer in and it becomes a desktop, for instance. That's typically going to be used on a network. Somebody that travels, a docking station, they dock their laptop, they're on the network, they take it off of the network, and they take the resources with them that they want for those things. Say again? Military does that a lot, yeah. Docking stations, so that you can take it on a trip with you and you have the stuff that you need with you. I think one of the things that would be really embarrassing would be to get to your destination and you get ready to do your presentation or whatever you went there for and you didn't have it. So that's kind of some of what it prevents. Topics, alternatives before you take into complex, prepare how to upgrade memory, exchange a drive, and these are some of the things that are available, are relatively easy to do in laptops. Before starting, again, we talked about warranty, the time a repair will take, and the alternatives to fixing or upgrading. The alternatives to fixing or upgrading is replacing, and laptops tend to be disposable items. They really do. They're going to last, a good laptop maybe lasts 4 years, 5 years. And when you get to its end of life, you're going to say, boy, this thing's really slow. It doesn't do a whole lot. And then you go buy a new one for half the price that you bought the old one for.
3 times as fast.
3 times as fast.
Twice as small.
And twice as small, and probably runs cooler. Substitute external components for internal components. Some stuff you can do that with, not a whole lot. Replace internal devices, we can do those. These are nothing that aren't the same for laptops as desktop. You what?
Is that vibration noise?
The ground yourself and all those rules are the same for whatever you're working on. What you don't want to do is to destroy the electronics inside it. The other one here, disconnect the AC adapter, and then in the desktops we should turn the power off on the bus. Turn the switch off. Hold the power button on the desktops to let it bleed down. You really want, and that's one of the things that Jeremy's light's for, is when you're working on it, you can tell that the power's off of the bus when that LED's out, that there's no longer any power on the bus. And you really don't, when you're working on these things, you don't want any power at all on the bus, because back to the ESD short and all sorts of unnecessary issues that we can cause with them. Talk about these. The small outline DIMMs, SO DIMMs, have the same capability. They're just smaller. SO DIMMs, if you haven't done them, the ones you're going to take apart back here don't have any memory in them. This came out of one of them. So we're going to have these things, small outline rims. And again, hopefully you're not going to run into these things. It was something that made a big splash. They sued a whole bunch of people, got a lot of money, and then we went on to the next version of DIMMs, DDR2, DDR3, when we do these things. Can only use the type of memory the notebook is designed to support. There are sites out there that will inventory your machine if you let them. And Crucial in specific has got, to me, a neat little app that you can go on and put on their little app and their inventory and say, oh yeah, this is the kind of memory that this machine has, and this is how many slots are full, and oh, by the way, if you want to, we'll sell you some memory, and then you can go buy it someplace else. Or buy it from them, either one, but those things are available. This is a number of different DIMMs, the packaging of them, but what should be apparent is they are much shorter than the regular DIMMs when we do those. And the laptop DIMM slots are going to be pretty easy to get to. The next slides that I'm really not going to do are kind of step-by-steps how to do this stuff, which are in the book, and I don't really want to do that. Considerations, how to upgrade process, similar desktop considerations, warranty, and all that other stuff. I'm going to have it for everything. General steps to decide how much memory to upgrade, purchase the memory, install it. Okay. Nothing magic about that one, is there? Hey, I want to upgrade memory. How much do I want? First thing I personally would do, because there are so many different memories out there, go find out what you really got. Go do the survey. Go to Crucial. Put the app on. Let it inventory it for you. How many slots are there? How many slots are empty? How many slots can you fill? Those kinds of things. It is a handy app.
That and your operating system, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
I can only have a certain amount.
I only have a certain amount and a certain type. Yep. Each of them, and it'll tell you how much you can put in. It does that. It does the inventory to help you out with those. Replacing the hard drive, same thing. We've got the warranty warning here. Notebook drive are 2.5 inches. I said an inch and a half earlier, didn't I? 2.5 inch. I still think the other one's a little bit bigger. May use SSDs. SATA or PATA 44 pin, on and on and on. How we do those things. Old drive crash things, and none of this is different than what you would consider for a desktop, isn't it? When we do those things. This is an older system, we got the screw, and this is where the manufacturer's books come in handy. What do you actually got to do? Most of the ones that I have tried to do the hard drives with lately have been right in the middle. See here, he's got himself grounded to one of these posts, and these posts are going to be onto the motherboard chassis. Many small screws work methodically. One of the things that they do recognize, screws in a pillbox label for each compartment. Something to hold them in, because what's going to happen is you get the thing apart, and you got all your screws laid out, and the cat comes running through your work area. And now your screws are someplace. Little cups, pillboxes are kind of handy. You see those things like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can label those for people that get to be my age that take a lot of pills. I don't take a lot of pills, but a lot of people do, so that you know which medication you're supposed to take each day. But they can be handy. They don't cost a whole lot. You can get them in a lot of places. On a soft workspace, use white tape labeling. You can also do some double back tape, or make your own double back tape and put them on there so that they don't wander away, because they will wander away. Right where the screw belongs, some of them may be a little bit different size, a little bit different thread type when you do them. A notepad help you organize the screws, and they just lay it on a piece of paper here on a notepad so that you can find them. It's kind of handy to lay them on the surface that you can see them on, white surface, something like that. Disassembly tips, la-da-da. We're going to not go, well, I'm going to click through these. The hardware manual, hardware service manual, to me that would be the first and last step that needs to be in this checklist, because it's going to tell you all the other stuff that you need to do to get it apart. Consider warranty, on and on and on, protect against ESD, and these are the same general checks that we had for everything else. Reassemble in reverse order, which means that you either need to take pictures, do sketches, make yourself a video so you know where things go back. You guys have been pretty good, but a class I had several months ago, we went over to take the computer apart for the first time. This guy got it apart and said, okay, now what? We'll put it back together. Well, how do I do that? Well, part of the assignment was to document this thing before you do that, so that you get in a habit of doing it. These are not really all that complex, but document, where do things go? One of the things, to me, my biggest bugaboo problem not biggest, but one of the biggest is putting those stupid little LED plugs back in the right place. Just where are they? Where do they go? Which direction do they go? If you get them in backwards, and the hard drive light stays on all the time instead of, it flashes off instead of flashing on, you need to turn it around. You've got it backwards. I mean, little things like that. Don't over tighten all the screws before installing the battery. Verify. This is a good one, that there are no loose components in there that you could short the system with. You should always be sure that there are no loose components before you do those things. Step by step, and again, unplug and remove the screws, all the other stuff that you're going to do. Basically, follow the directions in the manufacturer's guide or in some other disassembly document or video that you found. And we found over the years that there really are a lot of good videos on YouTube to step-by-step how to do these things. These all say take the keyboard out first. That may or may not be the case. Depends on the system, what you're going to do with these things. The mini PCIe wireless, when you take these things apart, you'll probably see the little wireless radio. The antenna on the wireless typically tends to go around the monitor. So when you're doing wireless, the monitor should be up and as vertical as possible. That's the correct polarization for the antenna. Place the processor. We'll get into these things, and here you can see the SODIMMs here, the processor cooling slots here for each of these things. Processor is under the heat sink. The cooling fan over here, a little bit offset from the everything else. Confined space. It's kind of like really moving from a 4-bedroom house into a travel trailer. And that's what if you think about it in those terms, how do you get all this stuff in there? Can you put everything in there? You probably can't put everything you had in a 4-bedroom house into the travel trailer. You got to put the essentials in. Pack everything else up, and then hopefully all of your USB stuff works. This is the single screw may or may not be a single screw that attaches it. It said that's going to be a function of the manufacturer itself. The LCD panel, each of them is a little bit different. They can be replaced. That's one of the things that probably is one of the high number replacement things. Keyboards, people spilling something in the keyboard. I messed up. The reason I talked about that Mac keyboard for trying to replace it is I messed up and I cleaned the keyboard. Problem is I used a cloth with some cleaner on it, and it was not nearly as resilient as the PC keyboard was. So it had to be replaced. Like half of the letters quit working, which is really not something.
Expensive to replace.
Or what?
Keyboards on a laptop.
I don't know that they are.
A friend of mine had just a regular old laptop, and they charged her $790 to replace it.
Well, then somebody got took if they charged $790 to replace a $15 keyboard. Well, yeah, you could buy a new laptop. You could buy two laptops for that price. But they should be. What's a keyboard? Another $25, $30, something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I know we have it $20.
Yeah, and they're typically, when you take these apart, how hard it is to get the keyboard out. Depends on the individual, not very. Usually going to have a screw and a hidden screw. And then you very carefully unplug it and very carefully plug it back in, put it back in. It shouldn't be an issue. Now, that's just outrageous. Somebody got took on that deal.
That was Geek Squad.
Well, I told you, we're not going to say who it was, but that's right. Man, that must have been one heck of a laptop. I'd have told him to keep it.
$400 for the laptop.
I would tell him to keep it. So, thank you very much. Yeah, give me the hard drive. I'm done. You could go back into the store and buy one for $250 or something like that. Yeah, no, that's somebody just got took. Remove the screws holding the hinge in place. And again, each of these is going to be a little bit different. But this is one that on one of these laptops back here, somebody tried to get it out, and then they took the hinge off, like the book said to. It comes right out. You got to follow the manufacturer's steps on these things, or they really won't work. All-in-ones becoming more and more popular. Service manual will get into the same thing. It's going to be a lot of components in a confined, not as confined as a laptop, but in a confined space. We kind of get the idea that this is something that's brand new, but there were some manufacturers years ago that had all-in-ones. The parts were not nearly as dependable then as they are now. But again, some components you'll need to buy because they're going to be proprietary. We're getting more and more. When we first started with these things, everything was proprietary. Then we got to open standards, which was really good, lots of competition there. Now we're going back to more proprietary on these things, which may be not necessarily a good thing. But this looks kind of like a big laptop. Everything's laid out on it, similar to a laptop. We have SODIMMs, all-in-one. It's got the SODIMMs here. Processor under the heat sink, the I/O controller for all these things, but it's all there in one component. The issue, again, that we have is if one of these components dies, what do you do? If you can do an external device, you can disable the one that's on the motherboard and use the external device, NIC. You can use external hard drives. Some of these things I've been reading about, the transformer things, the Windows laptops. Some of them have slots that you can put in a micro SD card, and says you can actually expand your storage on what essentially becomes a tablet to 128 gig, which is pretty good storage for a laptop. For a tablet. It's not very good storage for a laptop. And they have USB slots. Troubleshooting notebooks, the diagnostics that you can get from the manufacturer, a number of those things. Common problems. Numlock. Are you using the function key when you're supposed to use the function key? The FN key, because a lot of keys on a laptop have multiple purposes, unlike on the desktop keyboard. No wireless connectivity, we talked about that. Be sure that the switch is on, the radio working, those kinds of things. Turned on, turned off, we can do that. Intermittent, it's sure that's within wireless range of the access point. The antenna's good. That when you replaced the screen, you didn't destroy the antenna on the of the wireless. The biggest thing is going to be within wireless range. And as you get further from the access point, your data rate's going to go down. That's the other thing to keep in mind. To turn the Bluetooth on and off, all of the directions. Power's not getting to the system. The battery indicator light is on. The adapter's plugged in. And the adapter's working. I had one that really, as the laptop got older and older and older, the power supply got less and less and less reliable. What I eventually found out was one of the wires had broken. Just at the end. Being the cheapskate that I am, I just sliced the insulation, soldered it together, and taped it up. But you may or may not, and if you do have to buy an adapter, be sure you get the correct adapter, because that's another proprietary. Even the same manufacturer will have a different adapter for the next generation when we go through those things. No display, blank, but the power look for the LCD cutoff switch or button on the laptop, if it has one, or actually they do have one when you close the lid. There's a little, typically when you close the lid, there's a little switch that says, okay, the lid's closed, now go through the, whatever I've told the operating system to do, go into save state or go into hibernate or whatever else and turn the monitor off.
I always try to figure out a way so I could shut the laptop to keep the screen going. Like when you have the keyboard and everything hooked up.
Yeah, that one's tough to do.
I don't know if you could or couldn't.
I don't think so. It would depend on it, but I don't think. I think that's maybe a combination that you're not going to be able to do. bad video. And one of the things that students used to love to do is adjust the brightness down to nothing, so that you had a blank screen and you turn the computer on and nothing's there. Check simple things like that. Is the brightness turned up? Update the video drivers, flickering screen, bad video card drivers, low refresh rate. A little bit we talked about, yours may or may not. 120, but some of them go to even above 120 refresh rate. Loose connections inside the laptop, and in the desktop, that's probably not going to be the issue because it plugs straight in with those things.
Could it be an SLI issue?
It could be. Obviously, it could be a lot of things. One of the things, it's a new video card, right?
Both of them.
Remember what the issue was with memory?
I did that.
You'd already reseated them?
They were both in the times 16,
Yeah.
so I put one in times 8, so they were right on top of each other. And that didn't do it, so I moved it back.
Yeah. No, any of those things, refresh rate, drivers, on and on.
I'm going to switch the
There
SLI.
are more, yeah. There are lots of things that can cause the strobing of color, including probably even fluorescent lights. We use fluorescent lights as just something that would kind of there, but fluorescent lights can cause issues. People that have eye problems, headache problems, they can cause headaches because they're not a solid light. They turn on and off constantly.
You ever watch the show Bar Rescue?
Notebook computers are designed for travel. Notebook manufacturer documentation is useful when disassembling and troubleshooting, and it is very useful when disassembling. How do you actually get these things apart? And when you take them apart, a lot of no two of them, I think, come apart the same way. They're similar, but they're not quite the same. Even again, the same manufacturer, they're not going to be the same. Recovery partition, it may have that. The PC cards, card bus, all these things are probably something you need to know about historically, I think, or if you're using something really, really old. Most of the expansion today is going to be with USB devices, if anything that we want to add. Drivers, big deal. Typically going to be proprietary drivers. If you upgrade the operating system, be sure you save your drivers. If you're going to wipe out the partition, be sure you save your drivers. So maybe you should just make a copy of your drivers just in case anything happens. Because you guys get copies of all these softwares that you can upgrade to. If you upgrade, it's not a big deal because the drivers are going to be there. And of course, the new version of Windows is going to need different drivers, but hopefully the nickel working it could go find the new ones for everything else. Video becomes an issue. The old laptop that I had the power supply with, I was going to put Windows, it was an XP machine, I was going to put Windows 7 on it. Put Windows 7 on it, it didn't really work good because that particular laptop didn't have a Windows 7 driver, proprietary video driver. You're not going to have a driver for every piece of hardware necessarily in the new version. Check those before you do it, or the people that you do the upgrades for may be really unhappy or disappointed when you get through with these things. That's the 7 and Vista. Vista we really don't want to talk about a whole lot, right? 7 is Vista that works. 7 uses a sleep mode and hibernation mode. It also uses a hybrid mode. When it starts running out of energy, when the battery gets particularly low, it'll automatically go from sleep mode to hibernate mode. So that if you're on that airplane and it's stored, in the luggage bin and the battery runs out, whatever you were working on that you thought you were going to have there, you still got because it's saved on the hard drive. So it does have a hybrid mode that allows that to happen. Use SODIMMs for memory. Components that are the same brand as the notebook, yes, all of those good things. Basically the same, because what we're talking about here, same brand, we're getting back into the proprietary world. You may or may not, memory you're going to be able to get generics, hard drive, SSDs you're going to be able to get something that goes into it, but if you're replacing something that's on the motherboard, you're probably going to need whatever the manufacturer provided you with. with that, you have any questions? No, quit now. And you can take a break. Questions? Going once, going twice? Nope.